Rowan Hale's 34th birthday morning began no differently than any other day. He woke in his small Boston apartment, pale autumn light filtering through the window, laying a muted glow across the desk piled high with papers. He had stayed up late the night before, finishing a scientific manuscript. And today's own birthday was nothing more than a meaningless marker of time he planned to let slip by. Rowan had long since abandoned the habit of celebrating birthdays. His mother had died when he was barely past 20, and since then, these days only carried emptiness. His younger sister Mara often tried to remind him, sending a message or calling, but he usually dodged her efforts. He didn't want to remember the years when family meant nothing more than his father's rigid control. Malcolm Hale, a man whose shadowy presence in his childhood was equal parts fear and hatred. Rowan was pouring his first cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. The sharp, deliberate chime made him frown. No one ever came by at this hour. Opening the door, he saw a deliverman holding a medium-sized parcel, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a pale blue ribbon. The man spoke briefly. "Delivery for Rowan Hale. Have a good day." Rowan signed with suspicion, then carried the package back to the kitchen. One glance at the sender's name made him freeze. Malcolm Hale, his father. A man he hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years. The man who had vanished from his life after his mother's funeral. The man whose memory was silence at the dinner table, merciless rules, and punishments that never fit the crime. Rowan inhaled sharply, his heart racing as possibilities flashed through his mind: prank, mistake, or something more calculated. But this was Malcolm. With him, nothing could ever be predicted. Slowly, Rowan untied the ribbon, peeled back the brown paper. Inside was a pristine white box, edged with pale blue. A small card fixed to the lid in handwriting he recognized instantly, those sharp, rigid strokes he had seen scrawled across his childhood schoolwork countless times. "Happy birthday, son. Give your father a chance. We can start over." "Father." Rowan dropped into a chair. For a moment, he didn't know whether to scoff or to tremble. His father, a man who had never once spoken a real sorry or happy birthday, now writing words that almost sounded gentle. Shaking his head, he lifted the lid. Nestled in translucent paper were rows of golden cookies, not store-bought. These were hand-baked edges, precise, decorated with delicate blue icing in leaf and floral patterns. He picked one up, turning it under the light. The faint scent of cinnamon and honey drifted up, meticulous, almost elegant, as though hours had been poured into their making. Rowan let out a disbelieving laugh. Malcolm Hale, the renowned professor of botany. The man who once berated him for 2 weeks for dropping a single bowl. Since when did he bake cookies? Since when was affection measured in sugar and flour rather than stern lectures? Rowan set the cookie down. What he felt was not sentiment, but dread. Something was wrong, so wrong that his stomach twisted. He thought of sealing the box and throwing it straight in the trash, but his hand hesitated. After all, it was a birthday gift. To toss it instantly felt extreme. He had never wanted any trace of his father in his life. Yet the box's painstaking detail sparked a flicker of doubt. His phone buzzed. A message from Mara: "Happy birthday, big brother. I wish we could celebrate together. Eli drew you a picture. It's adorable." Rowan opened the attached photo, a child's sketch, bright and clumsy. A house, a wide sun overhead, 3 figures standing on the lawn. One with brown hair like his, one with long hair like Mara's. And in the middle, a small boy grinning wide. Rowan's chest tightened. He looked again at the cookie box, then typed back, "I'm thinking of driving over later today. Would that be okay?" Seconds later, Mara replied, "Really? Eli will be so happy. So will I please come." Rowan put the phone down with a sigh. He decided to bring the box along. Not to eat, but simply so he wouldn't have to see it haunting his kitchen. The highway out of the city was quiet. Late autumn wind slipped through the cracked window of his old car, carrying the scent of wood smoke from scattered homes. The box sat silently on the passenger seat, an unsettling passenger of its own, when he turned onto Mara's small street. The contrast struck him. Her modest rental house, though humble, radiated warmth. Chalk drawings covered the front walk. Wind chimes tinkled from the porch. Rowan felt something inside him ease. The door swung open before he could knock. Eli ran out, flinging himself around Rowan's legs. Uncle Rowan," the boy shouted, eyes shining. "Aren't you sad, having a birthday with no cake?" Rowan froze, then smiled, ruffling his nephew's hair. "I already have the best gift, you and your mom." Mara appeared behind her son, her eyes ringed with fatigue, yet glowing with joy. "Happy birthday, Rowan." Brother and sister embraced in silence. It had been so long since Rowan felt any genuine thread of family. Inside the kitchen, Rowan set the box on the table. Mara frowned. "Who sent this?" Rowan hesitated, then murmured, "Father." The air seemed to thicken. Mara stared at him, incredulous. "Father baked. For you? Are you certain?" "I can't believe it either." "But this is his handwriting." He pushed the box toward her. Mara opened it, her eyes widening at the ornate cookies. "My God, he never gave me a single sweet without scolding me." And now Eli peeked over the table, face lighting up. "They look yummy. Mom, can I try one?" Rowan and Mara exchanged a look. Neither answered Dot and Rowan's gaze. Unease still smoldered. He tried to mask it, but inwardly the thought pulsed. This isn't a gift. It's a sign, and I've brought it here. The next morning, the shrill ring of the phone shattered Rowan's heavy sleep. He glanced at the clock, barely past 6. Only one person ever called him this early. Mara. Rowan picked up, his voice groggy. "Mara, what's wrong?" Instead of a greeting, he heard chaos, moans, a child crying, ragged breathing. Then Mara's voice, hoarse and broken. "Rowan, Eli threw up all night. I'm not well either. We're on the way to the hospital." Rowan's heart jolted, sleep vanishing in an instant. "Stay calm. Where are you?" "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's. Please, come quickly." The call cut off. Rowan tossed the phone onto the bed and scrambled into his clothes. Down in the garage, his hands shook so badly he could barely hold the keys. The whole drive, his chest hammered. Every breath strangled by invisible fear. One thought kept pounding in his head. No, it couldn't be the cookies, could it? At the hospital, tension hung thick in the air. Medical staff rushed stretchers down the hallway, shoes squeaking, machines clattering. Rowan scanned frantically until he saw Mara slumped in a waiting chair, her face pale, sweat dripping down her temples. A nurse was hooking an IV into her arm while Eli lay curled on a gurney. Flushed and trembling, eyes watery, Rowan rushed forward. "God, Mara, what happened?" Mara lifted her head, lips quivering. "Last night after you left, Eli ate 3 cookies. I only had 1. By midnight, he couldn't stop vomiting. I doubled over too. I think it was the cookies." Rowan's throat tightened. The memory struck like a blade pushing the box toward Mara and Eli. Eli's excited cry. They look so good. He hadn't stopped him. He'd even told himself, it'll be fine. And now a young doctor approached briskly. "Are you family?" "I'm her brother." "The boy's uncle," Rowan said, voice trembling. "How are they?" The doctor shook his head. "The boy is stable for now, but severely dehydrated. We're replenishing fluids. The mother's condition is worse. Toxin seems to have hit her harder. We need more tests." "Toxin?" Rowan repeated, disbelieving. Yes, symptoms suggest food poisoning from a contaminated source. We'll run toxicology immediately. Rowan felt the world tilt beneath him. He nodded rapidly, guilt surging like a flood. His phone buzzed again. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A deep, familiar voice filled his ear, the voice he had tried for years to forget. "You received my gift, didn't you?" Rowan froze. A chill shot down his spine. "Father, I asked you, did you eat it?" Malcolm Hale's voice pressed each word, laced with both expectation and menace. Rowan's eyes flicked to Mara, writhing in pain, to Eli, gasping weakly. His breath quickened. "No, I gave them to Mara and Eli." Silence. A pause so long it seemed endless. Then Malcolm's voice cracked, ice cold. "You what?" Rowan's hands shook, cold sweat running down his neck. "They ate them. Not me." A sharp intake of breath, then a rasping, mirthless laugh that made Rowan's chest constrict. His father's voice dropped lower, hissing through his teeth. "Fool, they weren't meant for them. They were meant for you. Only you." The call ended abruptly, leaving nothing but the flat beep of disconnection. Rowan stood paralyzed in the hospital corridor, the phone slipping from his grasp. In that instant, the truth seared through him. The box hadn't been an olive branch. It was a weapon, a test, a trap. And he, too weak to refuse it, had shoved his sister and nephew into its jaws. That evening, as the city lit up, Rowan still sat in the waiting room. Doctors moved in and out. Eli was moved to pediatrics out of immediate danger, but still under observation. Mara burned with fever, her pulse fragile. Through the glass window, Rowan watched her lying still, 4 lines tethered to her body. He clenched his fists so hard his nails cut into his palms, drawing blood. His father's words echoed. Only you, old memories flooded back. His father forcing him to swallow bowls of bitter broth, calling it medicine to strengthen will. Nights when his mother lay bedridden after arguments with Malcolm, only to rise in the morning with a forced smile. For years, Rowan had told himself it was just harsh discipline. But now the pieces fused into something monstrous. He whispered, almost inaudibly. "He's been doing this all along." A police officer appeared, asking preliminary questions. Rowan hesitated, unable to tell the whole truth. He only said, "They may have eaten cookies from a relative." "I can't be sure, but deep down, he knew." The truth could not stay hidden. Malcolm Hale would not stop here. Next time, he would come straight for Rowan. Through the glass, Rowan looked at Eli, the boy fast asleep, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. In that fragile moment, an unspoken vow crystallized. Whatever it took, he would end this. He would never let his father touch Mara or Eli again. The hospital room was bathed in harsh, white light. The scent of disinfectant burned at Rowan's nostrils and only made him feel more disoriented. He leaned back in the metal chair, eyes fixed on the clear glass. On the other side, Mara lay motionless, each faint heartbeat mapped in small blips on the monitor. Eli was better now, dozing in the pediatric ward. But the image of the little boy vomiting through the night haunted him still. Rowan closed his eyes, but darkness did not bring rest. Instead, long-buried memories rushed forward, rendered so vividly they chilled him. He remembered his 10th birthday. His mother, Helen, had hurriedly baked a small apple cake after Malcolm left for work. She whispered, "Don't tell your father, okay? This is from me alone." The cake smelled sweet, but the joy was short-lived. Malcolm came home early and saw crumbs on the table. That night, he dragged Rowan to the dining table and set a bowl of thick, unidentifiable, dark green liquid in front of him. "Eat. This is how you learn discipline. Nothing is free." Rowan forced it down. The bitterness stabbed at his head, his throat burning. His mother sat silently, eyes rimmed red, unable to intervene. Other fragments returned. Mara at 6, clumsily spilling orange juice onto the newspaper their father read. Malcolm silently wiped the table and said nothing. But that evening the family ate only dry bread and water. He ate the roast by himself, slowly, each bite deliberate, as if teaching a lesson. Mara cried quietly through the night. And then his mother. Helen, the gentle, fragile woman who frequently suffered headaches and stomach aches after arguments with Malcolm. Doctors had labeled it nervous tension. Now, looking back, Rowan saw a terrifying pattern. Those illnesses always followed the times she refused to obey his father. Rowan opened his eyes and inhaled deeply. He had never dared to piece those shards together into a complete picture. He had convinced himself his father was merely strict and his mother simply weak. But now, watching Mara lie still and remembering Malcolm's brittle laugh over the phone, denial was no longer possible. Malcolm Hale was not merely strict. He had weaponized food, the very thing meant to nourish. When Rowan returned to the chair, Mara let out a soft groan. He jumped up and hurried into the room. A nurse allowed him a few minutes at her bedside. Mara opened her eyes, voice hoarse. "Rowan, I'm sorry." "No, don't say that." "This isn't your fault." Mara tried to move her hand. He gripped it without hesitation. "The cookie box, didn't you think it was strange? Why would he suddenly do something he never did in his life?" Rowan bit his lip. His chest tightened. "I think I know." But I didn't want to believe it. Mara looked straight at him, tired eyes steady with resolve. "I saw it when we were little. One time Mother did something my father didn't like. They had a fierce fight. After that, I saw him crush something into my mother's teacup. When I asked, he told me it was herbal medicine for health. But the next day, she started vomiting." Rowan froze. "Why did you never tell anyone?" "Because you didn't want to hear. You always defended him. I tried to tell you, but you said I was imagining things." Tears spilled at the corners of Mara's eyes. "I swear, since I was small, I knew Father was not safe." But no one believed me. Rowan felt a sharp pang. He had indeed dismissed her as overly sensitive. He did not want to accept that his father, a respected professor in the community, could be capable of such cruelty. He squeezed his sister's hand, voice trembling. "I was wrong, and I swear I will not let this happen again." When the nurse asked him to step out, Rowan walked into the corridor and found a familiar figure waiting. Aunt Agnes, his mother's sister, sat quietly. She had once dared to oppose Malcolm, but gradually withdrew from the family. Agnes looked at him with an expression that mixed pity and gravity. "It has happened again, hasn't it? He did it like before." Rowan frowned. "You knew?" Agnes nodded slowly. "Your mother, Helen, confided in me many times. She suspected, but had no proof. I've seen things too. But who would believe a woman claiming her husband poisoned food?" Rowan's head spun. He had spent his life running from memory. While Aunt Agnes held key pieces of the puzzle, she continued, voice low. "Rowan, you need to know. Malcolm did not become this by chance. In his youth, he grew under the shadow of his own father, your grandfather. The old man believed in physical discipline with herbs, but in truth, he conducted experiments on his children. A sister of Malcolm's, Isolde, was committed to an asylum after she accused their father of putting poison in food. After that, her name was wiped from the family record as if she had never existed." Rowan went numb. The unfamiliar name Isolde carried a sudden, sickening significance. "You mean Father learned this from his father?" Agnes nodded, eyes heavy with sorrow. "Yes, and he turned it into a family legacy. Helen tried to protect you children, but she couldn't win." Her voice choked. "She couldn't." That night, Rowan drove back to his apartment with his mind reeling. He pulled open the drawer and read the birthday card from his father over and over. The tidy script now looked like a blade. Give me a chance. We can start over. He threw the card onto the table. A cold resolve flared inside him. He could no longer flee the past. If Malcolm carried on a poisonous family tradition, Rowan would be the one to end it. But to do that, he needed the truth, evidence. He needed to confront the house, where his father hid the house that surely contained secrets yet to be revealed. Staring into the mirror, eyes hollow and face worn, he whispered a vow as if speaking to himself. I will not let him destroy anyone else. Not Mara, not Eli. This time, I will end it. Near midnight, Boston lay muffled under a heavy fog. Rowan Hale steered his aging sedan northward out of the city. With every mile, the streetlights thinned, replaced by the thick darkness of endless pine forests. His destination, the remote wooden house where Malcolm Hale, his father, whose true face Rowan had only just uncovered, had been hiding since his mother's death. Finding the location hadn't been easy. Rowan remembered a faded postcard among his mother's belongings, printed with Lake Superior and scrawled at the top with a handwritten note. Malcolm's retreat. Back then, he'd assumed it was nothing more than a research cabin. Now, it felt like a bunker of terrible secrets. His car jolted to a stop at a dirt path leading deep into the woods. No lights, no neighbors. Only the hiss of insects and the whisper of wind through the trees. Rowan drew a deep breath, stepped out. His heart hammered. But his grip tightened on the flashlight and his phone. The house appeared through the pale tree trunks. A two-story cabin. Its white paint peeling, curtains drawn tight across the windows. It looked like an abandoned farmstead, yet the chill creeping up Rowan's spine told him he was being watched. He approached. The front door was locked tight, its new padlock gleaming. Circling to the back, he found an older door with rusted hinges. He tried the knob, gave way. The hinge screeched in the silence, sending shivers through him. Inside, the air was damp and cold. It didn't smell like a home, it smelled haunted. Rowan flicked on the flashlight, its yellow beam cutting across the living room. Books towered precariously in stacks, papers strewn across tables. The walls were covered with religious imagery, wooden crosses. Cheap Bible prints, interspersed with strange symbols Rowan had never seen. He stepped into the kitchen. Wooden shelves lined with glass jars filled the room. Each jar bore a neat handwritten label, his father's hand. No mistake. Rowan's pulse quickened as he read. Belladonna, digitalis, aconite, taxus. Names straight out of toxicology texts he had studied. All lethal plants mere milligrams could kill. Among them sat jars labeled lavender, rosemary, chamomile, as if Malcolm had deliberately camouflaged poison among herbs. Rohan swallowed hard, nausea twisting his gut. On the dining table lay rows of notebooks, filled with black inquiries and rigid script. He opened one at random. Experiment number 14. Low-dose aconite, mixed with honey. Effect, numb lips, dizziness within 30 minutes. Subject, H. Rowan froze. H. Helen, his mother. He flipped to another page. Experiment number 29. Digitalis infused tea. Subject M. Effect, vomiting, weakness. Must lower dosage for prolonged exposure. M. Mara. Or himself. Rowan's hands shook so violently he almost dropped the notebook. There was no doubt. This was a lab journal. Malcolm had treated his wife and children as test subjects. Then something glinted on the shelf. Rowan swung the beam of light. Smaller jars, these didn't hold herbs, but personal items. A faded fabric bough. A ribbon scrap. Each labeled with familiar names. Helen Hale, Rowan Hale, Mara Hale. Rowan froze when he reached the third. His own name. Inside, a brass button, the same kind from his high school uniform. He had never understood how it went missing. Now he knew. His father had kept it entombed in glass like some twisted charm. He staggered back, heart pounding. It wasn't only toxins. His father had turned family memories into a grotesque ritual of worship. His foot struck a frame on the floor. He bent, brushing away dust. Behind the glass was a girl of 13, hair in twin braids, eyes staring solemnly at the lens. Beneath, in his father's handwriting, Rowan Hale, 1979. Rowan's breath caught. Isolde the name Aunt Agnes had whispered. The sister erased from family history. The girl's eyes mirrored his own, the same cold gray. The same sharp brows. Shaking, he slipped the photo into his coat pocket, then crunching gravel outside. Car tires. Rowan snapped off the flashlight, heart slamming. He crept to the back door, peered out. Headlights cut through the trees. A car pulled up, not Malcolm. Rowan held his breath as an elderly woman stepped out. She carried a ring of keys and calmly unlocked the front door. Gray coat, silver hair in a bun, her steps deliberate. He had never seen her, yet something about her stirred a strange familiarity. Rowan slipped silently into the woods, weaving between trunks until the cabin was a dim silhouette behind him. From a distance, he glanced back. The house glowed faintly from a single yellow lamp. His fist tightened around the pocket holding Isolde's photo. Questions swirled. Who was the woman? Agnes, an accomplice. And why did Malcolm keep a picture of Isolde, the girl the family had erased? Driving back through the fog, Rowan barely felt his own hands on the wheel. The moment he returned to his apartment, his phone rang. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Rowan, an elderly woman's voice, sharp and commanding. Who is this? I am Margot Hale, your gratante. Rowan froze. Aunt Margot, the younger sister of his grandfather. A name he had heard only in passing as a child, who had cut ties with the family decades ago. Why are you calling me? Because I know you've been to the house. Margot's voice trembled faintly, but held firm. And I know you found Isolde's picture. Listen to me, Rowan. You must stay away from Malcolm. He hasn't stopped. Meet me tomorrow at Harborview Cafe at noon. There are things you need to hear. The call ended before Rowan could reply. He stood, frozen, heart pounding. His hand gripped the photo of Isolde in his pocket. This was no longer only about a cruel father. Behind Malcolm loomed an entire legacy of darkness, and Rowan had just stepped into the heart of it. Harborview Cafe sat quietly along the Charles River, where the midday light shimmered off the rippling water. On most days, it was a place where college students gathered for study groups or tourists stopped to rest. But for Rowan, today it felt more like the stage of a clandestine play, one that had been rehearsed in shadows for decades. He stepped inside, the smell of roasted coffee mingling with the soft clink of spoons against cups. At the far corner, facing away from the window, sat an elderly woman. Her hair was pure white, neatly pinned back. Her navy cloak, modest but commanding. Her sharp eyes locked onto him immediately. Rowan, her voice was firm. No introduction needed. He walked over and sat across from her. A strange familiarity stirred, like a face from a blurred childhood memory. Aunt Margot. She nodded, her thin hands tightening around the teacup. I never thought I'd see you again. But when I heard about Mara and the boy, I knew Malcolm had gone too far. You need the truth. Rowan swallowed, his pulse quickening. I found Isolde's picture. Who was she? And why was she erased from the family? Margot closed her eyes briefly, summoning memory. When she opened them, sorrow swam deep within. Isolde was your father's sister. They called her a curse, but the truth is, she was a victim. The first victim of this family. Rowan's hands clenched on the table. Tell me everything. The story spilled from Margot like a dark river. Rowan's grandfather, Edward Hale, had been a respected pharmacist in Michigan. Obsessed with herbs and toxins, he became fixated on the idea of purifying the bloodline. To the community, Edward was dignified. To his family, he was a twisted experimenter. He used Isolde as his subject, Margot said, voice low. Whenever she disobeyed, he slipped what he called correction medicine into her food. Afterward, she'd collapse, vomit, sometimes run a fever for days. No one outside the family knew. When Isolde finally dared to speak, he branded her delusional and locked her in an asylum. She was only 16. Rowan's stomach twisted. He pictured the solemn gaze in the photograph, a teenage girl with eyes both strong and desperate. And Malcolm? Rowan's voice nearly broke. Margot drew in a deep breath. Malcolm was the only son. Edward never harmed him severely. Instead, he taught him everything: how to classify plants, measure doses, disguise toxins. And Malcolm learned quickly. By the time Edward died, his son had become a perfect replicon, far more discreet. Rowan listened, chest pounding like a hammer. Memories from his childhood snapped into place, his father stirring herbs into his mother's drinks, the strange meals. The discipline of bitterness, all of it rooted in a poisonous legacy. Margot's eyes hardened like steel. Rowan, you must understand, your father isn't just cruel. He believes he's continuing a mission. To him, it isn't Krimit's love, and his final targets are always the children deemed worthy. A chill ran through Rowan. He recalled Malcolm's words over the phone. Only you. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint jazz humming through the cafe. A cruel contrast to the wait at their table. At last, Rowan asked, "Is Isolde still alive?" Margot nodded. "She's at Stillwater, a psychiatric hospital in northern Wisconsin. For 40 years, the drugs have clouded her mind, but sometimes she has flashes of clarity. Once, she told me, Edward and Malcolm both believed love had a bitter taste. But true love never needs to be tested." Rowan bit his lip, throat tight. Part of him wanted to drive to Stillwater immediately to see her, to confirm it all. Another part knew danger was closing in. Malcolm would not let him go that far. Margot placed her hand on the table. Urgent. You mustn't underestimate him. If he sent those cookies, it means he's chosen you for the inheritance ritual. Mara and Eli were collateral only because you refused. He will come back, Rowan, and next time, it won't be just cookies. Rowan inhaled sharply, steadying the tremor in his chest. I have no choice. If this is the family's ritual, then I'll be the one to end it. I won't let him touch Mara or Eli again. Margot studied him, eyes filled with both worry and hope. Be careful. He's more cunning than you think. And Rowan, her voice faltered, then grew heavy. Your mother, Helen, she didn't die of heart failure, as the records say. I'm certain she was poisoned. No one dared investigate at the time. The words cut into Rowan like a blade. He closed his eyes. His mother's face returned to him, her soft brown hair, her gentle smile, the warmth of her hands on his shoulder. Perhaps all of it had been stolen by those sweetened, deceitful doses. Leaving the cafe, Rowan stood by the river, the cold wind lashing his face. In his pocket, Isolde's photo lay like a silent witness. He knew he was walking into an uneven battle. One man against the father he had both feared and despised his entire life. But for the first time in years, his path was clear. He was no longer the boy running from the past. He was the only one who could protect Mara, Eli, us, and break the cursed inheritance of the Hale family far out on the water. A small boat skimmed across the surface, leaving faint ripples behind. Rowan watched it, whispering to himself, I won't let the blood of my mother, of Isolde, of Mara, be wasted. I'll uncover the truth. And this time, Father, You won't escape. October skies in Wisconsin hung low and gray, the clouds sagging as if about to touch the rooftops. Rowan had driven for hours from Boston, past blazing red maples and barren fields, until finally he reached the weathered sign. Stillwater Psychiatric Facility, the 3-story red brick building, looked more like an old boarding school than a psychiatric ward. But the tall wire fences and peeling paint on its barred windows betrayed its decay. Rowan cut the engine, heart pounding. He didn't know what he was hoping for: confirmation, or a truth far worse. He showed his papers at the front desk. The duty nurse, a thin figure with wary eyes, looked at him curiously. "You're here for Isolde Hale. She rarely gets visitors." In fact, almost never. Rowan nodded, unease rising. "I'm her nephew. I need to see her." After some discussion, the nurse led him down a long corridor that reeked of disinfectant, past locked doors that clicked shut behind them. At last, they stopped at a small room. The door opened, and Rowan saw her Isolde Hale. A woman in her 60s, thinning hair, sat in a metal chair by the window. Her gaze was cloudy, but when she heard Rowan's name, a faint light flickered there. "Rowan," she whispered, voice rasping like wind through wooden slats. "You have my eyes." Yes, the eyes of the Hales. Rowan's throat closed. He sat opposite, gripping his knees. "You know me?" Isolde nodded faintly. "I saw your picture once. Malcolm showed it to remind me the bloodline isn't broken. I've waited for someone to come." Rowan swallowed hard. "I need the truth. About my father. About my grandfather. About this tradition they dare to call love." A flash of anger crossed Isolde's eyes, softening quickly into grief. "Love is never bitter. But in our family, they made us believe otherwise. Edward, your grandfather, called it a test. Anyone who couldn't swallow it was unworthy. I fought back, and for that, I've been imprisoned here my whole life." Rowan sat frozen. He really poisoned food. Yes, in cakes, in tea, even in warm milk before bed. He said it was medicine to make me pure. When I resisted, I was labeled delusional. Malcolm sat nearby, memorizing every formula. He was proud to be the heir. Her voice trembled, each word cutting into Rowan like a blade. Isolde leaned forward, her frail hands clutching his across the table. "Listen to me. Malcolm believes a child must prove their worth through endurance. To him, you are the goal. Mara and the boy, they are only obstacles." Rowan clenched his jaw. Images of Mara, pale in the hospital bed, and Eli clutching his stuffed dinosaur burned vividly in his mind. He won't touch them again. "I swear it." Isolde gave a small, bitter smile, equal parts proud and pained. "That's what your mother said too. Helen. She came to see me once before she was gone. She whispered, 'I must get the children away from him.' But she never had the chance." Rowan's heart twisted. Aunt Margot had hinted Helen hadn't died of heart failure. Now, hearing Isolde confirm it, the truth pressed sharper. Do you have proof?" Rowan asked, desperate. Isolde shook her head. "Only memory. But in his house, my journals remain. If you find them, you'll see everything. I recorded every time Edward and Malcolm poisoned our food. Every day your mother wept in secret." Rowan recalled the notebooks. He had already found in the cabin the experiments marked H&M. But if Isolde's journals existed, they would be human testimony, not just Malcolm's cold calculations. He nodded faintly. "I'll find them." A sound stirred outside the door. The nurse signaled visiting hours were over. Rowan squeezed Isolde's hand one last time. "Do you have any final advice?" Her cloudy eyes suddenly sharpened. She pulled him close and whispered, "Don't trust anything he gives you. Not words, not food, not affection. He always hides poison inside it. You're only safe when you hold the truth yourself. Rowan left Stillwater with a heavy chest. Outside, drizzle had begun to fall. He sat in the car, watching raindrops blur the windshield, hands gripping the wheel. Isolde's words echoed endlessly. Don't trust anything he gives you. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Rowan answered, and his heart sank at the familiar voice. You visited her. Malcolm's tone was calm, as if discussing daily business. I know, because there are still those loyal enough to tell me. You think you're cleverer than your father. Rowan held his breath. Where are you? A dry laugh crackled through the line. Not far. You'll see soon enough. But remember this, Rowan. What I began, you will finish. The bloodline does not end here. The call cut off, leaving Rowan in chilling silence. That night, he returned to Boston. Mara was recovering, able to sit up and speak. Eli was still pale but smiling again. Rowan didn't dare tell them everything about Isolde. But when he met Mara's eyes, he knew he couldn't hide the truth forever. You need to know something, Rowan said softly. Father won't stop. He believes I'm the one who must inherit. To him, you and Eli are obstacles. He'll try again. Mara clutched his hand, eyes bright with defiance. Then we move before he does. We find the proof. We tear this madness apart. Rowan nodded. Determination flared in his gaze. He had warnings now from Isolde, from Margot, from memory itself. And only one path lay ahead, to expose Malcolm Hale. Boston lay under a thin veil of late autumn fog. The trees outside Rowan's small apartment glowed yellow, yet inside him all was a suffocating gray. Since Malcolm's call, Rowan lived in constant vigilance. His phone never left his bedside. Every creak in the hallway jolted him awake. Mara noticed the change. One afternoon, while Eli sat at the kitchen table coloring, she set a cup of tea in front of Rowan. You're hiding something from me, aren't you? Rowan looked up, eyes heavy with fatigue. He almost denied it, then shook his head. Mara was no child anymore. He called me Malcolm. He knows I saw Isolde. And Rowan inhaled deeply. He said I'll have to finish what he began. Mara's face drained of color. What does that mean? That in his eyes, only I'm worthy. You and Eli are obstacles to be removed. Silence thickened the air. Mara glanced at her son, then turned back, her voice trembling but firm. Then we fight back. We don't let him decide our lives. 2 days later, the first letter appeared. A plain white envelope slid beneath Rowan's door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Verses from Scripture scrawled in block letters. Whoever does not obey shall be cut off from the seed. Beneath it, a sloppy handwritten formula, monkshood 2, 3 drops. Lavender 2 spoons. Rowan slammed the page onto the table, his heart racing. Mara picked it up, face pale. This isn't just a threat. He's reminding us he's watching. Rowan called Detective Grant, the officer who had handled the poisoning case. Grant promised surveillance around the building, but his tone carried doubt. Might just be scare tactics. Without concrete evidence, it's hard to press charges. Rowan nearly hurled the phone. He knew Malcolm wasn't bluffing. That night, Eli woke screaming from a nightmare. Rowan held the boy in the living room, listening as he sobbed. There was an old man with white hair standing in the corner. He told me not to eat candy anymore. Rowan's chest plummeted. Mara stood frozen in the doorway, hands trembling. Both knew Eli had never met Malcolm so. How could he describe him so exactly? The next day, while shopping, Mara discovered something in her handbag. A peppermint wrapped in strange blue paper with a slip of paper tucked beside it. For the child, sweetness will teach him obedience. Panicked, she tossed it into a public trash bin and rushed home, breathless as she told Rowan. He called the police immediately. Grant came, but by then the trash had been emptied. No evidence. He wants you to unravel, to wear yourselves out with fear, Grant sighed. We'll step up patrols in the area. Rowan glared at him. If you don't stop him, someone will die. This isn't just psychological. A week dragged by in tension. Mara limited Eli's outings. Rowan took leave from work to stay home. But just when they thought they had contained it, Malcolm struck again. Friday evening, the doorbell rang. Rowan checked the peephole. A nurse in scrubs, holding a paper bag. Vitamin supplements for Eli from his pediatrician, the nurse said gently. Rowan's skin prickled. Leave it there. We'll bring it in ourselves. But when he opened the door, the hallway was empty. Only the paper bag remained. Inside was a bottle of children's vitamins, the label familiar but the expiration date had been scraped off. At the bottom of the bag lay another note. Don't let your boy grow weak like his mother. Mara burst into tears. Rowan hurled the bag into the sink and scalded it under boiling water until the ink bled away. He's been here, he muttered, eyes red. Right outside our door, that night, Rowan didn't sleep. He sat at the window, watching shadows stretch under the streetlight. Near dawn, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. One text, "We will meet again where the bloodline began." Rowan's blood ran cold. Mara, read it. Voice shaking. He means the old house in Michigan, or the cemetery where mother rests, Rowan said. Eyes darkening. Either way, he's drawing us there. He decided they couldn't just wait. He tried to reach Isolde for guidance, but the nurse reported she had suffered a violent episode, repeating one chilling phrase. Blood will spill at the old altar. An altar? Rowan remembered St. Luke's Chapel, the small church in the Michigan woods. Once restored by Malcolm's donations, he turned to Mara. That could be where he plans to end this. We have to get there first. Mara gripped his hand, fear and resolve mingling in her gaze. But not alone. We bring the police in. This isn't just family anymore. Rowan nodded. He knew the final confrontation was closing in. The spiral of threats had become a hunt. The road into the Michigan woods twisted in darkness, nearly devoid of lights. Dense mist coated the windshield, forcing Rowan to squint until he made out the faded wooden sign. St. Luke's Chapel, -1892. Beneath it, in faint, smaller letters, a place of cleansing. Detective Grant's patrol car followed close behind, headlights sweeping across bare trees. Mara sat in the back seat with Eli, her hand stroking the boy's hair over and over. Rowan could feel her trembling fingers on his shoulder. Are you sure this is the place? Mara whispered, as if afraid to wake her son. Isolde said blood would spill at the old altar. This is the chapel Malcolm poured money into restoring. If he has a place he calls purification, it's here. Grant's voice crackled over the radio. We'll move in cautiously. No cars in the lot, but don't be fooled. A man like him could walk a mile through the woods to stay hidden. Double quote St. Luke's emerged like a ghost among the trees. The small white wooden chapel, with its low bell tower and peeling doors, had stood for over a century. Stepping out of the car, Rowan smelled damp rot mixed with burnt wood. Eli clutched his mother's hand, wide-eyed. I'm scared. Mom. Mara crouched to hug him, murmuring, as long as you're with me and Uncle Rowan, you'll be safe. They left Eli in the patrol car under an officer's guard. Rowan and Mara followed Grant inside. The chapel door groaned as it opened. Inside, darkness reigned, broken only by moonlight spilling through a cracked window. On the altar, a few candles had melted to stubs, wax dripping in long rivulets. At the center of the room stood a long table draped in white cloth. Scattered across it were glass jars, identical to those Rowan had seen in the cabin. Aconite, belladonna, Digitalis. Grant raised a hand, gun ready. Rowan stepped toward the table. A notebook lay open, its rigid handwriting declaring, "Cleansing October 17th. Recipient, M. Mara. Read softly." M, does that mean me? Rowan gripped the book. No. It means Milo. Mara's heart clenched. She bolted toward the door, but a voice rang down from above. Correct? The child is the true beginning. Rowan looked up. Malcolm stood on the bell tower platform tall, gaunt, white-haired, candlelight glinting in his round glasses. In his hand gleamed a metal object, a syringe. Grant aimed his gun. Malcolm Hale. Drop it. Come down now, Malcolm laughed. You think you've come to hunt me, but I summoned you here. Blood survives only through trial. Mara's boy will decide the fate of this line. Mara screamed, "You will not touch my son." Malcolm lifted the syringe, his voice calm, almost lecturing. Just a few drops. He'll learn obedience, as I once taught you. Grant stepped closer. Put it down, Malcolm. This isn't a ritual, it's a crime. You don't understand. Malcolm shook his head. This is ceremony. And Rowan, you know it. I chose you. Rowan stepped forward, his pulse pounding. You destroyed my mother, and now you want to destroy the next generation. You call it love, but it's obsession. Malcolm sneered. Obsession is the only way to keep blood strong. Sweet love makes mankind weak. No, Rowan said firmly. Obsession is what weakens you. We grow stronger because we can love without fear. For an instant, Malcolm faltered. Then his eyes flared with madness. He leaped from the stairwell with startling speed. Rowan collided with him, both crashing onto the wooden floor. The syringe flew, skittering toward the altar. Mara screamed, dashed forward, grabbed it, and hurled it into the flame of a candle. Glass shattered, the liquid hissing into smoke. Malcolm roared, "No. You can't destroy my life's work." He drew a small knife from his sleeve, slashing toward Rowan. Grant fired once, the bullet striking the floor inches from Malcolm's hand. Drop it now. Grant barked. Malcolm gasped, wild-eyed. Instead of surrendering, he spun and bolted through the rear door of the chapel. Rowan sprang up and chased him, footsteps echoing through the decayed sanctuary. Cold air blasted as they burst into the forest. Outside, the woods loomed black, broken only by the sweep of Grant's flashlight. Malcolm staggered, slowed by age. Rowan caught him near a small lake behind the chapel. "Enough, father." Rowan shouted, keeping distance. "You no longer decide who lives or dies." Malcolm turned, breath ragged, knife flashing in his hand. "You think you can sever the bloodline?" "No, Rowan. Once you taste it, you'll understand. You belong to me." Rowan shook his head slowly. "No, I belong to Mara, to Eli, to myself. You're nothing but rotting history." With a final cry, Malcolm lunged. Rowan blocked the two, grappling at the water's edge, mud splattering under their weight. Grant arrived, seizing Malcolm from behind. The old man screamed, thrashing, "You cannot kill my will. This bloodline will never vanish." Cold steel cuffs clamped around his wrists, the metallic snap ending his frenzy as the police car carried Malcolm away. Rowan stood at the chapel's entrance, watching Mara clutch Eli tightly. The boy trembled but was safe. Rowan felt something end, but also sensed the storm was not over. Mara looked up, tears streaking her face. "Do you think he'll stop?" Rowan squeezed her hand. "Whether he lives or not, his shadow lingers. But tonight, at least, we reclaimed some control." The last candlelight flickered across the wooden floor. One chapter of truth had been revealed, but Rowan knew the journey was not finished. Isolde's journals remained, his mother's death unsolved, and scars that a single night at St. Luke's could never erase. Malcolm was taken away in handcuffs. Yet the silence that followed felt heavier than his screams. In the days that followed, Rowan drifted through a haze. The news covered it briefly. A former pharmacist arrested on suspicion of multiple family poisonings. Investigation ongoing. But for Rowan and Mara, the aftershocks couldn't be summed up in a few lines. Eli still woke from nightmares. He would sit up in bed, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, whispering, "Will that old man come back?" Mara gathered him into her arms. "No, sweetheart. You're safe now." But when she looked at Rowan, her eyes betrayed lingering doubt. Both of them knew Malcolm had left something unfinished, something yet to be uncovered. 3 days later, Detective Grant called. We combed through St. Luke's Chapel. In the attic, we found a locked wooden chest. Inside were documents, decades of records. "Rowan, I think you need to see this." When Rowan and Mara arrived, the police had spread the contents across a long table. Hundreds of yellowed pages, all written in Malcolm's sharp, unyielding hand. Lists of poisonous herbs, formulas. Observations on the reactions of test subjects. Some pages even had photographs of children. Women among them, their mother, Rowan Hale. Rowan's hands trembled as he turned a page. Malcolm had written, April 1994, Helen responds weekly. Arrhythmia after 3 days. Reduce dosage to prolong. Avoid suspicion. Mara dropped the paper, her face drained of color. Oh God. So mother. Rowan swallowed hard. All his life, he had believed she died of heart disease. Now the truth crashed down like a collapsing wall. He killed her. Slowly, deliberately, until her body couldn't take any more. Grant stepped in, his tone grim. We'll be cross-checking old medical files, but this journal alone is grounds for reopening the case. It's the first concrete evidence of systematic homicide, amid the pile. Rowan noticed a smaller notebook wrapped in faded gray cloth. The handwriting inside wasn't Malcolm's. The strokes were gentler, slanted left. He recognized it instantly, his mother's. On the first page, it's only one line. If anyone finds this, know that I tried. Rowan sank into a chair and read line after line. Helen wrote about dizzy spells, her heart racing. Always brushed off by Malcolm as stress. She wrote of her suspicions, though she had no proof. And she wrote of her children. If I disappear, may someone protect Rowan and Mara from their father. Mara buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Rowan bit his lip until he tasted blood. She knew. She tried to warn us. Grant exhaled, his eyes somber. This is her legacy to you, not only the truth, but a plea that reached across time. That night, Rowan couldn't sleep. In his apartment, the two journals lay side by side before him, Malcolm's ledger of cruelty and Helen's fragile testimony. Darkness and light. Executioner and victim. He remembered Isolde's words. Never trust anything he gives you. Rowan realized his entire life had been clouded by that poisoned love. Yet even in her suffering, his mother had left behind a seed of resistance. One evening, after Eli had fallen asleep, Mara poured Rowan a glass of water. Rowan, what will you do with the journals? He stared at his mother's handwriting, his voice steady. Expose them, not just to the police, everyone. He lived his life in shadows. We'll drag it all into the light. Mara nodded, tears glistening. Then people will know Mother didn't just fade away. She fought to the end. A week later, Grant called again, his voice low. Malcolm is dead. He drank cleaning chemicals in his cell. Doctors say it was too late to save him. Rowan stood frozen, emotions colliding inside him, relief, rage, emptiness. Mara, when told, only clutched her son tighter. As if afraid the world might collapse again, Grant added, we found a small notebook in his cell, disguised as a recipe book. But it was a list of victims. Names never reported. He called it his family legacy. Rowan closed his eyes. No, the true legacy is Mother's, not his. And that's what we'll pass on to Eli. Legacy of truth, not poison. At their mother's grave, drizzle streaked the sky. Rowan and Mara stood together. A weight lifted at last. Rowan laid a sunflower on the stone Eli's choice. "Mother, your son is growing up in the light, not in Father's darkness," he whispered. Mara placed her hand on the stone, her voice steady, "and will teach Eli that love never has to be proven through pain." That night, they moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. In the warm new kitchen, Mara baked their first batch of cookies in months. Eli ate with laughter, frosting smeared across his cheeks. Rowan watched, a warmth filling him he had never known before. He knew the past could never be erased. But in his mother's words lay a gift, the belief that real love heals. And that was the only legacy worth keeping. Spring arrived earlier than usual. Daffodils had already begun to bloom along the road leading to the little house on the outskirts of Boston. Rowan stood on the porch, watching Eli crouch over a fresh garden bed, planting a few seeds with careful hands. The boy tilted his head, messy brown hair falling into his eyes. His small fingers smudged with dirt, but his face glowing with joy. "Uncle Rowan, do you think these will grow faster than me?" Eli asked, his voice innocent. Rowan chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Definitely faster. But by the end of summer, I bet you'll be taller than them." Mara stepped out from the kitchen, a glass of orange juice in hand. Morning light brushed across her face, and for a fleeting moment, Rowan saw their mother Helen Hale, but freer, brighter. Mara handed the glass to Eli, then sank down onto the steps with a long exhale. "See, we finally have an ordinary morning." Ordinary. The word made Rowan pause. All this time, what he longed for wasn't triumph or revenge, but exactly this: an ordinary breakfast, an ordinary home. And now, that dream was real. The city had already moved on from Malcolm Hale. The news offered only brief summaries. The case closed with the labels suspect, deceased. But for Rowan and Mara, his shadow lingered in memory. They didn't try to erase it, they learned to live alongside it. Like a scar, a reminder, but no longer a master. One afternoon, Detective Grant stopped by, carrying a sealed box. "The case is officially closed. But I think this belongs to you." Rowan opened it. Inside lay their mother's journal, along with a few pages of Malcolm's notes that hadn't been destroyed. Grant rested a hand on Rowan's shoulder, his voice warm. "Keep these. Not to haunt you, but to remember that the truth is out." Rowan nodded, eyes stinging. Mara whispered, "Thank you. You never gave up." Grant smiled softly. "No, you didn't give up. I just followed your light." By May, Mara had taken a part-time job at the community library. Eli joined a children's art class. And for the first time in years, Rowan returned to architecture the passion he had abandoned under his father's shadow. His first project, renovating an old playground in the neighborhood park. One evening, while all three painted the playground walls, Eli drew a giant sunflower in bright yellow across the brick. He beamed. "This is Grandma's flower. She'd like it, won't she, Mom?" Mara knelt to hug him, her eyes glistening. Rowan gazed at the sunflower, his heart easing. Helen was gone, but her true legacy lived on in this moment. Love, passed forward without poison. Later that summer, Rowan hosted a small backyard gathering. No grandeur, just friendly neighbors, Detective Grant and the nurse who once cared for Isolde. Mara made lasagna. Eli baked butter cookies for dessert. When the boy carried out the tray, both Rowan and Mara froze the sight of cookies, stirring dark memories. Eli blinked, confused. "What's wrong?" "I baked them myself." "Nothing bad inside, just chocolate and butter." Rowan laughed, pulling him into a hug. "I believe you. And I'll eat the first one." He bit into the cookie. Sweetness melted across his tongue. For the first time in years, the taste was no longer laced with fear. It was healing. That evening, Rowan sat alone under the setting sun. He opened his mother's journal, his eyes catching on her words once more. "If I disappear, may someone protect Rowan and Mara." He whispered, "Mother, I did it. Mara and Eli are safe. And will live, not just survive." From inside came Eli's laughter, mingling with Mara's soft singing. Rowan closed his eyes, letting the breeze carry the scent of daffodils around him. That autumn, Eli started elementary school. On his first day, he turned back to wave at his mother and uncle, eyes shining. "I'm going to draw more sunflowers." Mara squeezed Rowan's hand, murmuring, "See." He stepped out of the shadows. Rowan smiled. Not just him. So have we. That night, he wrote the final lines in his own notebook. Closing the old chapter at last, love is not control. Love is not a cruel test. Love is allowing someone to exist as they are and choosing to stay without condition. True love is sweet, never bitter. He closed the book and placed it beside his mother's journal on the shelf. The Hale family's darkness had ended, and a new beginning had opened a beginning, Rowan. Mara and Eli would write together with a love untainted, a love truly their own. Perhaps what lingers after this story is not only the horrifying truth that was revealed, but the strength of genuine love. Rowan, Mara, and Eli walked through the shadows, yet they refused to let the darkness define their lives. They chose love, freedom, and the sweetness of simple moments. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If this story touched you, please remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support is what keeps us bringing more heartfelt and healing journeys to life.